An employee allowed a homeless girl to sing in the restaurant in exchange for food. When the owner arrived and realized what was happening, he did something that left everyone in shock. The night was already stretching beyond closing time, and exhaustion was etched on Gabriel's face. He was cleaning the last tables of the restaurant, the muffled sounds of cutlery and plates coming from the kitchen in the background. The restaurant, located in the heart of the city, was frequented by demanding customers and had an oppressive atmosphere, with Richard, the owner, always lurking, looking for faults. Gabriel, though efficient, felt worn out by the monotony and lack of purpose in his job. But that night something was about to change. As he exited through the back door, he took a deep breath of the cold, early morning air. He walked slowly to the bus stop when he heard a sound that made him stop. In the alley next to the restaurant, a small figure was kneeling near a trash can. Gabriel approached cautiously and saw a girl, barefoot, rummaging through food scraps. Her hair was disheveled and her clothes, dirty and torn, clearly showed neglect. "Hey, are you okay?" he asked softly, so as not to scare her. The girl looked up, frightened, holding a piece of hard bread. Her eyes, large and full of fear, met his, but she didn't respond. "Are you hungry?" Gabriel continued, kneeling to her level. Without waiting for an answer, Gabriel extended his hand. "Come with me. We'll get you something better than this." The girl hesitated, but the kindness in Gabriel's eyes convinced her. He took her inside the restaurant, which was still empty, with the staff finishing up the cleaning. Upon crossing the door, he discreetly called Charles, the cook. "Charles, can you prepare something simple? A small plate." "Are you crazy?" Charles replied, looking at the girl. "Richard will kill me if he finds out. He doesn't need to know. I'll take responsibility. Just do it, please." Charles shook his head but relented as Gabriel led the girl to a table in the back. She seemed suspicious, looking around as if she expected to be kicked out at any moment. When the plate arrived, Gabriel pushed it toward her. "Eat. No need to rush." As the girl devoured the food, Gabriel struck up a conversation. He learned her name was Julia, and that she had been living on the streets for months. She spoke little, as if each word required great effort. "Thank you," she said, almost in a whisper when she finished. "No need to thank me." "But," Gabriel smiled, "you could do something for me. You said you liked to sing. Sing a song." Julia's eyes widened in surprise. "I can't. Not here." "You can. It's just one song. Come on, try." After another moment of hesitation, Julia began to sing. Her voice was soft at first, as if testing the environment, but as she relaxed, her voice grew stronger and filled the empty dining room. The melody was sweet, melancholic, but full of emotion. The restaurant staff stopped what they were doing, drawn by the music. Even Charles emerged from the kitchen door, drying his hands on his apron, mouth agape. The room fell into absolute silence, except for Julia's voice. When she finished, the sound still seemed to echo. No one said anything for a few seconds until timid applause began, coming from the employees. Julia looked around, unable to believe the impact she had made, but the magical moment was interrupted by Richard's abrupt entrance. "What's going on here?" His harsh voice echoed through the room. He approached, his eyes fixed on the girl. "Who is she? Why is she here?" Gabriel stood up, trying to stay calm. "She was hungry. I just wanted to help her." Richard huffed, crossing his arms. "This isn't charity. It's a restaurant, and you, Gabriel, broke the rules by bringing her here. I want both of you out of here now." Julia recoiled, shrinking back, but Gabriel took a step forward, his posture firm. "She didn't do anything wrong. She just sang. You saw what happened. Everyone stopped to listen to her. That doesn't matter. I'm the owner of this place, and what I say is law, and if you have a problem with that, you can pack your things and leave too." The room fell silent again, but this time it was a heavy silence, filled with tension. Gabriel looked at Julia, who held her gaze low, then turned back to Richard. "I won't apologize for doing the right thing," Gabriel said, his voice low but full of determination. Richard gave him a cold look before turning his back and leaving. Gabriel took a deep breath and knelt beside Julia. "Let's get out of here. Don't worry, I'll take care of you." And with that, the two left the restaurant, plunging into the cold night, unsure of what the future held, but certain that they were together. The tension in the restaurant's dining area seemed almost palpable. Gabriel, still beside Julia, faced Richard's stern gaze, who stood at the entrance with his arms crossed, the rigid posture of someone accustomed to giving orders. "Gabriel, you have 5 minutes to get her out of here. Otherwise, you don't need to come back tomorrow." The staff stopped what they were doing, casting worried glances. Julia, curled up behind Gabriel, held his arm tightly. The situation was a standoff. Gabriel knew that any choice he made would be difficult, but Richard's cold tone sparked a rebellion within him. "You really don't get it, do you?" Gabriel replied, his voice firm but restrained. "This girl didn't ask to be here. She just needed food, and what she did in return was more than any customer has ever done. She brought something this place never had, soul." Richard took a step forward, his eyes flashing with anger. "I don't pay anyone to give me moral lessons. The rule here is simple. My word is law, and if you can't follow it, the door is right there." The entire dining area held its breath. Gabriel looked around, saw Charles in the kitchen, the other waiters standing silently, and finally turned his gaze back to Julia. She looked so small, so fragile, but there was something in her eyes, a silent plea for him not to give up. And then Gabriel made his decision. "All right, I'm leaving." His voice was steady but filled with emotion. "I'd rather lose this job than lose my humanity." The silence that followed felt eternal. Richard huffed but said nothing more. Gabriel grabbed his coat hanging behind the counter, extended his hand to Julia, and led her out of the restaurant. They left the suffocating environment behind, stepping into the cold darkness of the night. On the sidewalk, Gabriel took a deep breath of the cold air, as if it were a relief, but reality immediately began to weigh on his shoulders. He had just quit his job, his source of income was gone, and now he had Julia to take care of. He looked at her, who followed silently by his side, and noticed she was trembling, both from the cold and the uncertainty of the moment. "Are you okay?" he asked. Julia nodded slowly, but Gabriel knew it wasn't true. "Let's find a place to spend the night," he said, trying to sound confident. "I promise tomorrow will be a new day." They walked through deserted streets, illuminated only by intermittent streetlights. Gabriel tried calling a friend, but no one answered. Eventually, they arrived at a forgotten square with wooden benches and a small abandoned bandstand. It was far from ideal, but it offered some shelter from the wind. Gabriel took off his coat and draped it over Julia's shoulders. She protested, but he insisted. "I can handle the cold. You can't." The two sat on the nearest bench. Julia remained silent for a few minutes, gazing at the stars that barely shone in the city's polluted sky. "I shouldn't have let you help me," she said, her voice almost inaudible. "Now you've lost everything because of me." Gabriel shook his head. "I haven't lost anything worth keeping, and it's not your fault, Julia." She was quiet again, but then she began to speak hesitantly, as if each word was a burden. "My mother. She always said we should never ask anything from anyone, that people only help when they want something in return. When she left, I tried to fend for myself, but it's hard. People look at you like you're a problem they want to avoid." Gabriel listened in silence, absorbing every word. Julia was young, but her words carried a painful maturity, the kind of wisdom that only comes from a difficult life. "It doesn't have to be like that," he said finally. "No one should have to go through that. Especially you." Julia looked at him, her eyes shining with emotion. "Why do you care so much? You don't even know me." Gabriel smiled, a small but genuine smile. "Maybe because someone needs to care. And maybe I need that just as much as you do." They stayed there for hours, talking about small details of each other's lives. Julia shared stories of her childhood before everything fell apart, while Gabriel spoke about his own journey, leaving a small town in search of something bigger, only to lose himself in a purposeless job. Gradually, Julia's distrust began to fade, and a bond started to form between the two. The early morning hours enveloped them, and Julia finally fell asleep on the bench, Gabriel's coat serving as a blanket. He watched her for a while, feeling the weight of the responsibility he now carried. But at the same time, there was something new within him, a silent determination to find a solution. Julia was no longer alone, and now neither was he. The first rays of morning sunlight began to illuminate the square, dispelling the cold of the early dawn. Gabriel was sitting on the bench, still awake, watching Julia, who was curled up asleep. He was thinking about what to do next. The choices seemed few, and each came with its own set of challenges. As he pondered, he heard soft footsteps approaching. He turned and saw Abigail, his neighbor from the building where he lived before losing his job. She was carrying a grocery bag and looked at him with a surprised and worried expression. "Gabriel," she said, stopping in front of him, "what are you doing here? And who is she?" Gabriel hesitated for a moment, but knew he could trust Abigail. She was known for helping those in need, always with a smile and a comforting word. "It's a long story, Abigail." He sighed. "This is Julia. She has no one. And now, I guess I don't either." Abigail frowned, clearly trying to understand the situation. "Come with me. I can't leave you here." She extended her hand to Gabriel. "Let's go to my house. At least there you can take a shower and eat something decent." Gabriel hesitated, but Abigail's look was firm and welcoming. He gently woke Julia, and the three of them quietly made their way to Abigail's small apartment. The space was simple but cozy, with the scent of freshly brewed coffee. While Julia took a shower and ate a slice of bread with butter, Abigail listened to the entire story. Gabriel talked about the previous night, his confrontation with Richard, and the difficult decision he had made. Abigail listened attentively without interrupting, and when he finished, she smiled slightly. "You did the right thing, Gabriel. It's not easy to give up everything for someone you just met. But this decision could be the beginning of something bigger." Gabriel shook his head, somewhat skeptical. "Maybe, but now I don't know what to do. I don't have a job, and Julia, she needs stability, security, something I can't offer right now." Abigail thought for a moment, then stood up. "I think I know someone who can help. Wait here." 2 hours later, Abigail took Gabriel and Julia to a small family-owned restaurant known for its warm and welcoming atmosphere. At the counter was George, a middle-aged man with expressive eyes and an easy smile. He seemed to be talking to a customer, but upon seeing Abigail enter, he quickly approached. "Abigail, what a pleasant surprise!" George greeted her, but his eyes soon fixed on Gabriel and Julia. "And these are—" "Gabriel and Julia," Abigail replied. "He needs a job and she needs a safe place. I thought you might be able to help." George raised an eyebrow, assessing Gabriel. There was something in the way he looked, as if he could see beyond appearances. "Is that true?" he asked. "Are you looking for work?" Gabriel nodded. "Yes, sir. I worked as a waiter at another restaurant, but I had to leave. It wasn't a smooth exit, but I can assure you I always did my job with dedication." George was silent for a few seconds, then smiled. Well, if Abigail trusts you, I think I can trust you too. We need help here. And if you don't mind a small, simple room upstairs, I think we can make this work." Gabriel felt a weight lift off his shoulders. He thanked him, almost unable to believe his luck, but soon added, "I really appreciate it, sir. But there's one thing. Julia is with me and I can't leave her behind." George looked at Julia, who was watching everything in silence. He scratched his chin thoughtfully. "Well, she can stay too, but in return maybe she could sing from time to time. If she wants, of course." Julia widened her eyes. "Sing?" she murmured, surprised. "Yes, this place is different from the other one." George smiled. "We love music, and if you want to sing, you're more than welcome." Julia looked at Gabriel, who gave a slight encouraging nod. She agreed timidly. In the days that followed, Gabriel started working at the restaurant, helping with the tables and sometimes in the kitchen. Julia, still shy, began singing for the customers. At first, it was something small, almost casual, but her voice soon caught attention. Customers started returning, bringing friends and family to hear the girl who seemed to have a heavenly gift. The restaurant thrived, and George was enchanted by the effect Julia had on the customers. He began suggesting that she sing more frequently, even at specific times, to attract more people. Gabriel watched everything with a mix of pride and concern. Julia seemed happy, but he started to notice signs of fatigue. Sometimes she hesitated before stepping onto the small makeshift stage, and other times her voice sounded less vibrant. He wondered if the pressure was beginning to affect her. That night, while helping Julia climb the stairs to the room, she turned to him. "Gabriel, do you think I'm doing the right thing?" she asked, her voice low and uncertain. Gabriel stopped, thinking carefully before responding. "I think you're doing what you can. But if something isn't right, you need to tell me. I promise I'll never let anyone force you to do anything." Julia smiled, but the fatigue in her eyes said something different. Gabriel knew he would need to stay vigilant. They were in a safe place now, but the battle for stability was just beginning. George's restaurant had transformed. What was once a cozy place, frequented by regular customers, was now always full, with lines at the door and a constant buzz about the girl with the angel's voice. The change was visible, both in the environment and in George himself, who seemed more lively and ambitious each night. However, as success grew, something dark was beginning to unfold. Julia's performances, which were once occasional and unassuming, soon became the highlight of the restaurant. George, noticing the impact her voice had on customers, began promoting daily performances. He even set up a small makeshift stage in the corner of the dining area with directed lights and a microphone. The idea was clear: make Julia the star of the place. At first, Julia seemed happy with the attention. The applause, the smiles, and the compliments made her feel special, something she had never experienced before. But as the days passed, the frequency of the performances and the constant expectation began to take a toll. "Gabriel, I'm fine," she said whenever he showed concern. But he noticed the signs. The dark circles starting to form, the more hesitant tone in her voice, the way she avoided looking at the stage before going up. One night, after a particularly long performance, Gabriel decided to talk to George. "George, can we talk?" he asked, pulling him aside as the dining area emptied. "Of course, Gabriel, any problem?" George replied, still radiant with the night's success. "I'm worried about Julia. She likes to sing, but I think we're pushing too hard. She's just a child. She needs rest, time to be herself." George raised an eyebrow, visibly surprised. "I understand your concern, Gabriel, but think about what this means for her. Julia has a rare talent, something that can change her life. And, honestly, yours as well. The restaurant is thriving like never before, and you both are benefiting from it." Gabriel frowned, uncomfortable with George's pragmatic tone. But at what cost? She's tired, George. This isn't just about the restaurant. I know, George interrupted with a more serious expression. But opportunities like this don't come twice. Do you want to take this away from her? I'm giving her the chance to be something bigger, something no one ever imagined. Gabriel fell silent. He knew George believed he was doing the right thing, but the price was becoming too high. He returned to the small room upstairs, finding Julia sitting on the bed, hugging her knees. "Are you okay?" he asked, sitting beside her. Julia nodded slowly but said nothing. Gabriel noticed the tension in her shoulders, the weight she carried, and felt helpless. How could he protect her without risking losing what they had achieved? In the following days, the situation worsened. George began promoting Julia's performances on social media, attracting even more people. He even suggested she learn new songs to keep the customers interested. Julia, though reluctant, tried to keep up, but her voice began to falter and her energy seemed drained. One night before going on stage, Julia looked at Gabriel, her eyes full of tears. "I don't know if I can do it, Gabriel. I'm tired." He held her hands, looking at her firmly. "You don't have to do this, Julia. No matter what they say. If you don't want to sing, I'll support you." Julia hesitated, looking at the stage and then at the crowd waiting for her. Finally, she took a deep breath and said, "I'll try. Just one more day." Gabriel felt a tightness in his chest as he watched her walk to the microphone. Her voice was still beautiful, but something was missing. The joy that once lit up her performances was gone, replaced by exhaustion. After the show, Gabriel decided he couldn't postpone the conversation any longer. He found George in the office, reviewing reservations for the next week. "George, this has to stop." George looked up, surprised by Gabriel's direct tone. "What are you talking about?" "About Julia. She's not a machine. She's a child who has already been through so much, and now she's exhausted." George frowned, crossing his arms. "Gabriel, you're overreacting. She has a gift. Do you think I'm doing this just for the restaurant? I'm helping you guys have a future." "But at what cost?" Gabriel retorted, his voice firm. "Her future can't be built on exhaustion. You're thinking about profits, not her." George was silent for a moment before responding. "I'll think about it, but for now, nothing changes." Gabriel left the office with a heavy heart. He knew he would need to make a difficult decision, but he also knew he was playing with fire. George had given them a chance, but now it seemed he was using Julia as a tool. What should have been a new beginning was becoming another test of survival. And Gabriel knew that sooner or later he would have to confront this reality, regardless of the consequences. George's restaurant was as crowded as usual, with little Julia about to take the makeshift stage. Gabriel watched from the corner, his heart heavy with accumulating doubts. He knew Julia was exhausted, but the girl seemed determined to continue, as if something inside her told her that giving up was not an option. The music began, and Julia sang with a vulnerability that seemed to carry the weight of her short but painful life. Her voice was sweet and full of emotion, reaching every corner of the dining area and silencing all the murmurs. Among the customers, a woman sitting near the back seemed especially affected. Dressed in simple clothes, her gaze was fixed on Julia, and silent tears streamed down her face. When the music ended, the applause was thunderous, but Julia only gave a slight nod before descending the stage. Gabriel helped her sit in a chair in the corner of the dining area, offering her a glass of water. He noticed the woman approaching, hesitant, as if each step required all her strength. "Are you Julia?" the woman asked, her voice trembling. Julia looked at her, suspicious, and then at Gabriel, who immediately went on alert. "Who are you?" Gabriel asked, positioning himself between the woman and the girl. The woman took a step back, raising her hands in a peaceful gesture. "My name is Anna. Her eyes filled with tears. "I am her mother." The statement fell like a bomb. Julia widened her eyes, frozen in place. Gabriel crossed his arms, his expression hardening. "This is impossible," he said, keeping a controlled but firm tone. "Julia told me you abandoned her." Anna took a deep breath, as if gathering the strength to explain. "It's true that I left her. But it wasn't because I wanted to. It was because I had no choice." Gabriel was still skeptical, but before he could respond, Julia abruptly stood up. "Are you my mother?" the girl asked, her voice small but full of disbelief. "Why did you leave me?" Anna fell to her knees, holding Julia's hands. Tears kept falling as she spoke. "Julia, I never wanted to leave you. I loved you more than anything, but—" She paused, swallowing hard. "My husband, your father. He got involved with dangerous people. They threatened our lives. I did everything I could to protect you, but one day I couldn't anymore. They said that if I didn't run, you would be next. I had no choice, Julia. I didn't have any." Julia pulled her hands away, stepping back. Her expression was a mix of anger and pain. "You didn't try to take me, protect me? I tried," Anna responded, desperate. "But things got out of control. They separated us. I spent all these years looking for you. I never gave up. I never stopped loving you." Gabriel watched in silence, absorbing every word. He felt Julia's pain, but something in Anna's voice seemed genuine. Still, he needed to be sure. "How did we find you now?" "Why here?" Gabriel asked. Anna took a deep breath, trying to compose herself. "I was passing through here. I heard people talking about a girl singing at the restaurant, a girl who seemed her age. I didn't believe it could be you, but when I heard your voice today, I knew. I had to try." The dining area had mostly emptied, and George watched the scene from afar, looking curious but not intervening. Gabriel looked at Julia, who seemed lost in her own thoughts. "Julia, do you want to keep listening?" Gabriel asked softly. Julia looked at him, her eyes shining with tears, and nodded. "Yes, but I don't know if I can believe her." Anna lifted her head, her expression firm. "I know I can't change what happened. I know you might never forgive me, Julia. But I want to try. I want to be in your life again, if you'll let me." The silence that followed felt eternal. Julia looked at Anna, then at Gabriel, as if seeking guidance. "It's your decision, Julia," Gabriel said, placing a hand on her shoulder. "No one can make it for you." Julia took a deep breath, trying to find the words. I don't know." Her voice trembled. "I need time." Anna nodded, still with tears streaming down her face. "That's all I'm asking." Gabriel decided to intervene. "Anna, I'll take her back to the hotel where she's staying. Give her space, and tomorrow we can talk more calmly." Anna agreed, clearly understanding that the situation needed care. As she left, Julia sat down again, holding her head in her hands. Gabriel sat beside her, respecting her silence. Finally, Julia murmured, "Do you believe her?" Gabriel thought for a moment, then replied, "It doesn't matter what I believe, Julia. What matters is how you feel. But I think if she's telling the truth, you deserve to know." Julia fell silent again, but this time there was something different in her expression. Something Gabriel couldn't decipher, but he knew it was the beginning of something bigger. In the days following the reunion with Anna, Julia seemed trapped in a whirlwind of emotions. She oscillated between curiosity about her mother and resentment for the abandonment. Gabriel tried to support her as best he could, but he knew this was an internal battle that Julia needed to face alone. Meanwhile, George continued to push for Julia to perform at the restaurant. He noticed that her regular appearances were a powerful draw, and the increase in profits confirmed it. Now, beyond the performances, he was suggesting new schedules and even additional sessions on weekends. That night, Gabriel met George in the office. The muffled sound of the still-filled dining area echoed through the walls, but Gabriel had something important to say. "George, we need to talk," Gabriel began, his voice serious. George looked at him, dropping the papers he was holding. "Sure. About what?" "About Julia. She's on the edge, and with everything that happened with her mother showing up, she needs time, not more performances." George huffed, leaning back in his chair. "Gabriel, I understand your concern, but think about what we're building here. This place has never been so busy. Julia is a rare talent, and we're giving her an opportunity that many children dream of having." Gabriel crossed his arms, his expression growing tougher. "You're seeing this only as an opportunity for the restaurant, George, but she's just a girl. She's not prepared for this pressure. I see it every day." George stood up, his eyes fixed on Gabriel. "Oh, do you think I don't care? Do you think everything I do is for money?" His voice raised, and there was a note of irritation. "I came from a place where no one believed in me, Gabriel. I managed to build this here through hard work, and when I see Julia's talent, I think about what I could have been if someone had given me a chance." Gabriel took a step forward, his tone firm. "And at what cost, George? You're projecting your dreams onto her, but you're not seeing what's happening to her now. Julia doesn't need fame. She needs care, security." George shook his head, frustrated. "And what are you suggesting, Gabriel? That we throw all this away? That she goes back to the streets? Is that what you want?" "That's not it," Gabriel replied with clenched fists. "But she needs a break, time to just be a child. If you can't understand that, maybe I should leave. And I'll take Julia with me." George fell silent, the impact of Gabriel's words reverberating in the small office. For a moment, he seemed to be struggling with something inside himself, and when he spoke again, his voice was lower. "Do you think it's easy, Gabriel? I give everything I can here. I try to help you guys, give Julia something she never had, and yet it seems it's never enough." Gabriel relaxed his shoulders, noticing something he had never noticed before. George wasn't just ambitious, he was also carrying an invisible burden, perhaps the expectation of redeeming something from his own past. "George, I understand what you're trying to do, but sometimes the best thing we can give someone isn't what we think they need, but what they really need. And Julia needs time to recover, to deal with all this." George ran a hand over his face, sighing deeply. What if she wants to continue? If she wants to sing even with all this? Then I'll be by her side, ensuring that it's her choice, not by pressure. Silence stretched between the two, filled with tension but also understanding. George sat back down, shoulders slumped. "Maybe I've gone too far," he admitted finally. "I'll think of something. But Gabriel, if she wants to continue, I want you to know that the space will always be here." Gabriel nodded, feeling that for the first time they had reached an understanding. He left the office, finding Julia in the small room upstairs. She was sitting on the bed, looking lost. "I talked to George," Gabriel said, sitting beside her. "He's going to slow things down. But Julia, it's up to you. You don't have to do anything you don't want to." Julia looked at him, her eyes tired, but there was a small glimmer of relief. "Thank you, Gabriel," she said, with a weak smile. "I just want things to get easier." Gabriel placed his hand on her shoulder. "They will, Julia. We'll get through this together." As night fell, Gabriel knew the battle wasn't completely won, but he also knew he had taken an important step to ensure Julia had what she needed most: a bit of peace. The days following the confrontation with George brought a change in the rhythm of Julia's, Gabriel's, and Anna's lives. For the first time, Julia had the opportunity to breathe, to sing only when she wanted, and to dedicate time to something that seemed scary but necessary: rebuilding her relationship with her mother. Anna began frequenting the restaurant to visit Julia and Gabriel, always staying discreet and respecting the girls' boundaries. In the beginning, the conversations between mother and daughter were short and hesitant. Julia asked direct questions, trying to understand the fragments of the past that Anna had shared. "You said you tried to protect me," Julia said during one of these meetings. "But how did you leave me alone?" Anna sighed, holding her daughter's hand gently. "I had no choice, Julia. The men who threatened our family were dangerous. When your father got involved with them, he put us in danger. I tried to run away with you, but that night, they found me first. I was taken away before I could get back to you. I spent years trying to find you." Julia looked at Anna with suspicion, but there was something in her mother's eyes that seemed sincere. Still, the weight of abandonment was not easy to overcome. "And why now?" Julia asked, her voice heavy with emotion. "Why did you come back now, after so much time?" Anna swallowed hard, tears threatening to fall. "Because I never stopped searching. When I heard you sing here, it was like everything finally made sense. I just want a chance, Julia, a chance to be your mother again." Julia's response was a long silence, but she did not pull her hand away from Anna. This small gesture was enough for Anna to continue trying. As Julia and Anna navigated their complicated relationship, George also faced his own process of reflection. He became more reserved, spending more time in the office, as if avoiding the gaze of Gabriel and Julia. But one night, after the restaurant closed, he finally mustered the courage to speak. "Gabriel, can you come here?" he called, his voice a bit uncertain. Gabriel entered the office, finding George sitting with a half-empty bottle of wine and 2 glasses. "It's not exactly my style, but I think I owe you one," George began, pouring the drinks. Gabriel sat down, accepting the drink but waiting in silence. "I've been thinking a lot about everything that happened," George continued. "About Julia, about what you said. And I realized I was wrong. I was blinded by what I thought was best, but in reality, I was just projecting my own failures." Gabriel raised an eyebrow, surprised by the sincerity. "George, you just wanted to help, but sometimes even good intentions can cause harm." George nodded, looking at the glass in his hands. "I know that now, and I want to apologize. To you, to Julia, to everyone. I'm going to change the way I manage things here. I don't want anyone else to feel used like Julia felt." Gabriel smiled slightly. "That's a big step, George, and it means a lot to all of us." The next day, George announced new policies at the restaurant. Julia's performances would be reduced, and any additional activities would be voluntary, with a greater focus on the well-being of all employees. The atmosphere in the restaurant improved, becoming a more welcoming and balanced place. Meanwhile, Julia, Gabriel, and Anna continued to rebuild their bonds. Anna began sharing stories of Julia when she was little, sharing memories that had been buried under years of separation. Julia, still cautious, started to open up space for her mother in her life, even if slowly. One evening, while they were all sitting in the small room that Gabriel and Julia shared, Anna held a guitar that George had given Julia as a gift. She began to play a simple melody, and Julia, almost instinctively, started to sing. It was a soft song, but full of emotion, and in that moment, it seemed like something connected between them. Gabriel watched in silence, feeling a mix of relief and hope. Maybe there was still a long way to go, but this was a start. Anna wasn't perfect, but she was trying, and Julia, even with the pain of the past, was beginning to open her heart. At the end of the song, Julia looked at Anna, and for the first time smiled genuinely. "You were good at that," she said, half joking, but with tenderness. Anna laughed, wiping away a tear that had been streaming down her face. "I learned from you." In the days that followed, Julia returned to singing at the restaurant, but now only when she wanted to. The performances were light, more relaxed, and the pressure that once suffocated her seemed to have disappeared. The audience continued to applaud, but Julia sang for herself, and that made all the difference. George began to adopt a more mentoring role rather than being a strict businessman. He engaged with the staff, listened to their needs, and tried to create an environment where everyone felt valued. Gabriel, seeing the transformation, finally felt that he had found a place where he could build something meaningful. The weight of the past didn't completely disappear, but now there was room for something new. A story that began with pain and abandonment was being rewritten with hope, forgiveness, and second chances. The days following the confrontation with George brought a change in the rhythm of Julia's, Gabriel's, and Anna's lives. For the first time, Julia had the opportunity to breathe, to sing only when she wanted, and to dedicate time to something that seemed scary but necessary, rebuilding her relationship with her mother. Anna began frequenting the restaurant to visit Julia and Gabriel, always staying discreet and respecting the girls' boundaries. In the beginning, the conversations between mother and daughter were short and hesitant. Julia asked direct questions, trying to understand the fragments of the past that Anna had shared. "You said you tried to protect me," Julia said during one of these meetings. "But how did you leave me alone?" Anna sighed, holding her daughter's hand gently. "I had no choice, Julia. The men who threatened our family were dangerous. When your father got involved with them, he put us in danger. I tried to run away with you, but that night, they found me first. I was taken away before I could get back to you. I spent years trying to find you." Julia looked at Anna with suspicion, but there was something in her mother's eyes that seemed sincere. Still, the weight of abandonment was not easy to overcome. "And why now?" Julia asked, her voice heavy with emotion. "Why did you come back now, after so much time?" Anna swallowed hard, tears threatening to fall. "Because I never stopped searching. When I heard you sing here, it was like everything finally made sense. I just want a chance, Julia, a chance to be your mother again." Julia's response was a long silence, but she did not pull her hand away from Anna. This small gesture was enough for Anna to continue trying. As Julia and Anna navigated their complicated relationship, George also faced his own process of reflection. He became more reserved, spending more time in the office, as if avoiding the gaze of Gabriel and Julia. But one night, after the restaurant closed, he finally mustered the courage to speak. "Gabriel, can you come here?" he called, his voice a bit uncertain. Gabriel entered the office, finding George sitting with a half-empty bottle of wine and 2 glasses. "It's not exactly my style, but I think I owe you one," George began, pouring the drinks. Gabriel sat down, accepting the drink but waiting in silence. "I've been thinking a lot about everything that happened," George continued. "About Julia, about what you said. And I realized I was wrong. I was blinded by what I thought was best, but in reality, I was just projecting my own failures." Gabriel raised an eyebrow, surprised by the sincerity. "George, you just wanted to help, but sometimes even good intentions can cause harm." George nodded, looking at the glass in his hands. "I know that now, and I want to apologize. To you, to Julia, to everyone. I'm going to change the way I manage things here. I don't want anyone else to feel used like Julia felt." Gabriel smiled slightly. "That's a big step, George, and it means a lot to all of us." The next day, George announced new policies at the restaurant. Julia's performances would be reduced, and any additional activities would be voluntary, with a greater focus on the well-being of all employees. The atmosphere in the restaurant improved, becoming a more welcoming and balanced place. Meanwhile, Julia, Gabriel, and Anna continued to rebuild their bonds. Anna began sharing stories of Julia when she was little, sharing memories that had been buried under years of separation. Julia, still cautious, started to open up space for her mother in her life, even if slowly. One evening, while they were all sitting in the small room that Gabriel and Julia shared, Anna held a guitar that George had given Julia as a gift. She began to play a simple melody, and Julia almost instinctively started to sing. It was a soft song, full of gratitude, and as the melody filled the dining area, Gabriel, Anna, and George watched her with pride. The audience applauded, standing up, but Julia's biggest smile was for her mother and Gabriel. "I sang this for you," she said, descending the stage and hugging both of them. Over time, the emotional scars began to heal. Julia found in Gabriel and Anna a home, not because of the physical place they were in, but because of the unconditional love and support they shared. Gabriel, in turn, found in the small family they formed a new purpose, something he never imagined before. That night he found Julia in the alley. George, now wiser and more humane, became a supportive figure for everyone in the restaurant. The place thrived, but now success was built on respect and empathy. On a sunny day, Gabriel, Anna, and Julia were at the square where it all began. Julia ran across the lawn with other children, while Gabriel and Anna watched. "You know, Gabriel, you've changed my life as much as hers," Anna said, looking at him. "I think we've all changed a bit, Anna, and maybe that's what matters. It's never too late to start over." As Julia ran back, smiling, Gabriel realized that the journey they started together had reached a place of peace. They still had challenges ahead, but now there was something that once seemed unattainable: hope. And so, amidst the simplicity of the moment, life continued, proving that human bonds and second chances can transform even the most difficult stories into something beautiful. I hope you enjoyed today's story. If you did, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought about the story. See you in the next video.